Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of The Musician's Musician. I am your host, Nick Costa, and today we have a really fun chat with my old pal, Tommy Rehbein. Tommy has been a staple in the Twin Cities music community for quite a long time. His current project, Toilet Rats, is just a ton of fun, but I know him from a legendary group called Small Towns Burn a Little Slower. Small Towns was the band that made me aware that there was a local scene in the Twin Cities. I was only really aware of bigger bands when I stumbled across their Pure Volume page, and yes, I am dating myself with that reference. I realized that you don't need to be some major label artist to make great music. A few years later, Tommy was kind enough to ask me to open doing a solo set for Small Towns, and that was the coolest thing I had ever done up until that point. I think I was 15. It was a Halloween show, and I dressed up in a Goodwill suit, shaved my beard into big sideburns, and I said that I was a lounge singer. I did not break character during the set of Poor Man's Dashboard songs, and I even closed out the night with a cover of New York, New York. All that to say, Tommy and all the Small Towns guys saw me as a kid who loved writing songs and gave me a platform. That's the kind of guy that Tommy is. He doesn't gatekeep what he knows or what he can do. He actively spreads his knowledge and kindness to support everybody. A music community isn't really a community if we aren't sharing resources and lifting each other up, and Tommy was one of the first people to show me that. He wanted to talk about Starflyer 59, who is a group that I honestly struggled to get into before this. Maybe it was part of me where when so many people say, hey, you would love this band, I actively avoid listening to it because I'm a shithead. But in actuality, I don't think I'd been pointed in the right direction until Tommy gave me 3 albums to listen to. You'll hear more about that journey in this conversation, but I definitely get it now. So with all that being said, let's get into it. All right. Well, I am here with Tommy Rehbein from Toilet Rats. Tommy Rehbein, thank you so much for being a musician's musician.
Hey, how's it going, Nick?
Good, man. How are you?
Pretty good. I just finished a work day and made dinner quick and fed the cats, and here we are.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Just had a work day, fed the dog, and scarfed down some food, and now we're gonna talk some music stuff. So before we get into your awesome choice, what's new with Toilet Rats? Is there anything going on?
Yeah. So the album's been out for a while. This summer, the label put out the deluxe vinyl version. And so that's actually been getting quite a bit more traction just because it's easier to get vinyl reviewed and stuff. So it's
totally
kind of got a little boost with a couple bonus tracks. It's been getting some positive press. And then probably by the time this podcast comes out in early 2025, we're releasing the Synth Redux version. And it's not like a remix album. Kind of what it is sometimes when I play solo shows, because I can't afford to go out of state with the whole band, I made all my songs just like drum machine and synth based.
Awesome.
So sometimes I'll do like kind of a synth pop set, and then when I have the full band, we do more of a rock set.
Yeah.
The label really liked the electronic version of the songs as well. So that'll be digital, cassette, CDs. So yeah, it'll be fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, for those who haven't heard Toilet Rats yet, it's kind of like this, I don't even really know how to describe it. It's like almost Devo-esque, kind of like synth punk. There's a lot of energy. It's catchy. It's funny. It's like very earnest at times too. It's a really unique sound.
Thanks.
Yeah, and the album is 4, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'd even say like kind of leans into like New Order.
Yeah.
I feel like my previous band was a bit more the Devo tip, and I feel like this band is probably more a little bit more like pop oriented.
Well, your choice was Jason Martin, who's also known as Starflyer 59. But do you remember the first time that you heard Starflyer 59 or Jason Martin's music?
Yeah, I was in high school and I was kind of starting to get into like My Bloody Valentine and Pixies. After I sort of, like a lot of teenagers, kind of start with the pop punk and then kind of expand out from there a little bit. And so I was starting to get into like My Bloody Valentine and Pixies, and like I'm trying to remember who. Somebody had told me, I'm like, oh, you should check out this band Starflyer 59. And so I actually bought their first album, and it's called Silver now, but at the time it was like 1994, and it was called Self-Titled, and I bought it and was just immediately hooked because it they had like this really interesting juxtaposition of like these big Black Sabbath riffs, but with like really soft, lush, shoegazy vocals.
Yeah.
And then lots of reverb, and I was like, man, this is awesome. I was really
yeah, I heard an interview with him, which is very hard to come across. He does not really care to do many interviews.
Yeah.
Where he was kind of talking more about somebody had compared them to the Deftones, and the initial reaction was something along the lines of like, nah, that's not accurate. And then kind of like, well, actually, because really, a lot of the stuff with shoegaze is like very, very heavy guitars, but they don't really want to like sing like rock guys.
Yeah.
Do the rock guy voice. And so, yeah, it kind of was an interesting perspective from like his view.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I guess I wouldn't necessarily put them in the same camp as Deftones, but I could see how a Deftones fan would maybe like the early Starflyer, because it does share some of those elements of heavy parts with really like dreamy, lush parts.
For sure.
So, and it's it's no secret. Chino likes a lot of shoegaze stuff too, so there's definitely some Venn diagram, but the band, I feel like the bands took pretty different trajectories.
Yeah, drastically, which we'll get into. It was a really interesting experience to kind of dive into their discography. I couldn't listen to every album in full, but like I listened to the ones that we're going to talk about several times, and then I kind of skimmed through the rest of them, and like you really don't know what to expect from album to album.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I think the first 3 albums have kind of that definitive sound where it's like kind of shoegazy with kind of the Black Sabbath-y guitars and sings really soft. And then the album after that is like a very wild departure. And he just kind of kept doing that throughout his career. And then they just put out a new record called Lust for Gold, and it's basically like a nod back to their second record, which is just called Gold. But I was basically like reading, or maybe I listened to an interview, but he has a kid now who's in his 20s and who plays drums with him now. Like,
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So his kid Charlie also has a pretty cool band called the Rocky Valentines.
Okay.
But his kid plays drums with him, and Charlie was like, "Dad, you should make a record like this again. This is my favorite one," or something like that. He's like, "All right, maybe I should listen to the kid. He's more tuned in to what, So he's never really been a guy who's kind of like tried to follow trends or anything like that. But I just kind of liked that he was really open to like his kid's suggestion.
Yeah,
and it's a great record.
Yeah, it's really good. And also, like, there is something to what he's saying. Like, obviously he's a kid, so he knows. But, like, there are so many new shoegaze bands that I find, like, very often. And it's, like, it's weird. Like, my day job is for a company that presses records. And so, like, I'll get the records. And, like, there's a 90% chance that the ones that we press, I put it on, it's like a new shoegaze band, and it rules. But yeah, it's kind of cool to have him go back to that sound because he does it so well.
Yeah, what's really cool is like that first record he did, I think came out in like 94. And I feel like he was right in there with all these other bands in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff out. But I think he never really got proper due until more recently. Like a lot of bands. I mean, you think of Jawbreaker or all these other bands that were around in the 90s, and they, you know, play in front of 100 people and then they disappear and they come back 20 years later, and all of a sudden there's just like massive crowd for them. And and I feel like they've been showing up on a lot of like best lists or influential lists.
Yeah.
I know their new record got a really strong response, and like NPR did a big thing on it and everything. But I think when he first came out, I feel like a lot of other bands didn't take him seriously because he kind of came from like, you know, he put out stuff on Tooth and Nail Records, and
right.
But he, you know, they've never really been like this proselytizing type band. They've just been like,
no,
he's a quiet dude, and he just sort of sings about like everyday life.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, kind of back then, you know, like I just think like a big reason maybe he didn't get his due at first was like maybe some people weren't really down with that affiliation or something, or maybe people just thought he was a youth group band or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
and Tooth and Nail kind of ended up having a moment like the late 90s and early 2000s where, like, you know, those bands were kind of cool. Like they were signing some like kind of like cooler bands, and like those bands were like going on Warped Tour and not just playing, you know, Christian festivals and stuff.
Yeah, but I think with like Britpop bands, especially because like I think like if you were like a pop punk band and you came from that world, I think people were a little bit more like accepting of it. But I think maybe in like some Britpop circles and stuff, you know, like I think it's gotten a lot better now, but kind of back then there was a little bit of gatekeeping, and I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I just got the vibe that like, you know, if had those releases maybe came out on like 4AD or something, he would have been like the biggest band in the world. But
oh, for sure. But
you know, like he put the records out on the label that was willing to like financially back him, and it gave him a limited audience. But it's really cool seeing him get his like respect and due and like critical praise all these years later.
Yeah, it's really about time. I mean, he's extremely prolific, and like even outside of that, he's got bands like Neon Horse, Bon Voyage, Low Tom, which is one of my favorites, which is with David Bazan.
Yeah.
And like him and Bazan kind of going back to like kind of like the, you know, the Tooth and Nail or like Christian affiliation thing there. They had kind of similar approaches to that style, I guess, or like that quote unquote genre where like it's not like Christian, like it's technically Christian music, but it's not really. Like you're listening to it and you're not being like, God, I'm sitting in church right now or something like that.
Yeah, I think Bazan like kind of famously went through like a big deconstruction thing.
Very much so, yeah. Jason
never went through that, but he's like remained really good friends with Bazan and some people in those circles.
Yeah.
But again, he's, you know, it's funny. He's like a truck driver.
Yeah.
I like write songs about like playing cards with his friends. You know, like lyrically, it's just like I kind of picture this guy in like Riverside, California, just like drinking a scotch and playing cards and just kind of having a really simple life. And I think I find it kind of entertaining, to be honest. Yeah,
it really is. And like, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff that's like pretty profound about his songs too, but like it's a lot about like and we'll get into it, but like even Leave Here a Stranger is apparently, like one publication said that it was a concept album about the troubles associated with the life of a recording artist, which is like such a funny thing to have a concept album about. we kind of touched on Gold a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like with Gold, like I put that on and I listened to it, specifically like the guitars.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I understand why Tommy likes this band.
Yeah, there's like a lot of noise.
Yeah, there's like a lot of noise, but like really interesting, lush, but somewhat dissonant riffs kind of happening there, which is like very you. There's like a level of jangle underneath like the massive distortion and reverb or something like that that's going on.
Yeah, it'd be like this wall of sound, but then I also love how like most of his leads are like this like clean, super verbed out like surf sound.
Yeah.
Playing all these like surf leads over this like massively distorted, riffed. And I like how on that album, like the drums are just like bone dry.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that. It like the dry drums on it that are like kind of buried in the mix a little bit sometimes. It actually does like a really cool thing for creating dynamics that I wouldn't have considered.
Yeah, it's like there's some really peculiar production choices on that record, but I also feel like those production choices make that record stand apart from a lot of other records in the genre. Because typically when you think of shoegaze, you think of like cavernous, super beefy drums and you know, like tons of like tambourines and overdubs and stuff. And he just kind of went for more almost like this like closed mic'd 70s drum sound. Maybe be more affiliated with like an early Neil Young record or something.
Yeah, yeah.
But then the guitars are just like massive. But it's really interesting though, because his vocals too, like I feel like his vocals and the drums are hanging out the same like sonic territory.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is a level of reverb on the vocals sometimes, but it really is like, especially for what was kind of sold to me after doing like a bit of research on it as being like, you know, this quintessential shoegaze record. I was like, it's kind of dry and it's awesome. It rules.
Yeah, I think they saved a lot of I think, I don't know. I can only speculate because wasn't there, but I think the guitars are taking up so much space sonically and just with like fuzz and feedback and then underneath all that, there's like lush tremolo clean guitars, but the guitars are doing like the heavy lifting on that record. So I think they just kind of kept the rhythm section pretty subdued and just let the guitars kind of have the spotlight. It
is very much a guitar record, and it's awesome.
I can't stress enough, like if anybody's listening to this and they're like, oh, I've maybe sort of heard that band's name, maybe I'll check them out. Just start with the Gold album. And I think that one's around like come out like 95 or something.
95, yep.
Yeah. So that's a really good one to start with because they do have a massive back catalog. But if you just like wild guitar noise, but also melody and cool textures and Fender amplifiers and stuff like that. If you know me, I'm into all that. I think you will appreciate it and enjoy it as a listener.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think he's a great songwriter too. Like he's got all this noise and stuff going on, but underneath it all, they're like really good pop songs.
They're incredible pop. Like the structure of the songs they're very simple a lot of times, but like so smart.
Yeah.
There's like little curveballs here and there, or there will be like, like a pre-chorus on the second verse, but not the first one, or something like that, where it's just like, oh, all right, well, that's fun.
I like that song Dual Overhead Cam. He does this like snare fill, and it's kind of like, I think the first time he plays it goes like 8 bars, and then when it comes back to it, before it goes into the bridge, and the bridge is just a big Sabbath riff with like a wailing guitar over it.
Yes,
but he's like, you're expecting it to just like, but he just does the snare fill for like a minute. It's like so out of left field.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just building this tension. They're just like playing this one chord. Well, he just does this snare fill. It's not like a drum solo. It's not a flashy fill. It's literally just like eighth notes, and then just a quick boom, like one top hit, and then they go to this like massive riff. It's just like it's so clever and weird, and you don't really think to conventionally do that.
Yeah,
I saw him live a couple times where like, if depending on the crowd, if he was feeling it, they would do that snare fill. Like, I think I saw him one time, they literally did that snare fill for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then they like went into the riff. It was really funny.
That rules. Like, I don't know. I love it when bands can have a part in a song where they can do that, and then they just like they can really milk it if they want to. Yeah. Yeah, in that same interview that I was referencing before, somebody referred to their drummer as essentially being like Animal, where like he's like he'll hit every drum twice in the matter of like a bar, but it's like not really the band that you would expect a drummer like that to be in, or like to play like that in.
Well, it depends which drummer you're talking about, because he's gone through a lot of them. Mm-hmm. The two guys I'm thinking of that would really go off on the drums, there was a guy named Wayne Everett, who also has a really good band from Jeff, who was in Smashing Pumpkins. Wayne and Jeff have a band called the Lassie Foundation.
Okay.
But Wayne drummed for Starflyer for a couple albums, and that, yeah, on the albums he'd keep it pretty chill, but like live he'd do these big super like 70s prog rock drum fills.
Yeah. Let me just check here. Because I think they were talking about the drummer on Lust for Gold.
That's his kid Charlie.
Oh, okay. So maybe that's who they were talking about.
Yeah, Charlie's a really good drummer.
Yeah.
If you look, like, there's live, it's super funny on the Rocky Valentines. I think just like his father, he plays most, if not all, the instruments and sings on the records, and then live he finds friends to play the shows with him. And it was pretty funny because there was a video of them, and live he was drumming even though he sang on the record, and then just like 2 other random dudes playing guitar and bass, and then for vocals they just put a mannequin at the front of the stage with a microphone in front of it. And so I think he must have been playing to a click track or something, because vocals were coming out of the PA. So I think it's funny he sang on the record and he just didn't feel like singing live, so he's just drumming.
Yeah, that rules.
This is like so weird.
Mm-hmm.
I get the feeling like it's hard to tell, because he, like you said, he doesn't do a lot of interviews, and he just seems like a really quiet guy with like short answers.
Mm-hmm.
He has this kind of dry sense of humor. I almost feel like his kid is very similar. Like, who would think to drum in the live band where you did the vocals in the album and then just run tracks of the vocals?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, if you don't want to do it, at least you found a solution to have them there still.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, yeah, let's get into the next one, because you were kind of saying that Gold was a good kind of diving in point if you're trying to get into it.
Yeah, like the first couple records. The Silver's the first one. Silver, to me, has a couple like really, really killer tunes. The opening track, Blue Collar Love, is sort of a quintessential song of theirs. And then they have a song called Hazelwood that, to me, it just sounds like a shoegazy Cure.
Yeah.
It's a little guitar lick that reminds me a lot of the Cure.
Absolutely.
And then, yeah, Gold is kind of the one that... Gold is probably my favorite. And then I think the next one would be Americana.
Americana was cool, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like excuse me. I feel like the first real big curveball is the 1998 album Fashion Focus.
Yes.
Which is, we're talking about like places to dive in. That, like, I really enjoyed listening to Gold, but I think my ears like really started kind of perking up at this one.
Yeah, I can see this record being like your cup of tea for sure. It's definitely like more of a pop record, and they kind of put the noisy guitars on the back burner, and some of the guitar work almost makes me think of like Johnny Marr or something.
It does have a little bit of like a Smithsy Britpop vibe.
Yeah, like a lot of acoustic, like layered acoustic guitars, and then like a lot of keyboards on this record. This is where they really started introducing a lot of keyboards to their sound.
Mm-hmm.
But they were a lot of vintage like string stuff, like ARP Selena or Farfisa organs and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's a very lush album, and I think the way it still ties to the old material is because like every album, he always has a few songs that almost have this like 60s chord progression with like surf licks over it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just on this record, he went from more chill of like a chill lush sound, but he still has this like slide guitars and like those like Pixies type leads and stuff.
Yeah, it's still very much a guitar record, I feel like, but just in a very different way. You know, it's a much more like subtle guitar record, I think, but all of the guitar parts are so cool.
It sounds to me like, maybe this is a funny way to say it, but out of his whole catalog, Fashion Focus to me sounds like the most California album.
It is, yeah, it is. It really perfectly sounds like the year 1998, but like not in like a Sugar Ray way, you know, like but it does sound like something that would be on the radio in that time, and like in like a cool way. Like that would be the one where I'd like wait by the radio and try and record it, you know, on tape.
Yeah, totally. I'm trying to think what else to compare it to. Yeah, I think the closest thing I would compare it to is maybe like the Smiths, but
yeah,
not vocally at all, but definitely like some of the guitar parts and things like that.
Yeah, vocally not quite with the Smiths for sure, but like it's still very much a Starflyer record as far as the vocals go, I think.
Yeah, he has this like very soft, chill, like hushed way of singing. Mm-hmm. And over the years, as he's aged and has smoked more cigarettes, his voice gradually got lower and lower.
It's really low now. For Lust for Gold, I noticed that it was like very low.
It's like 2 octaves lower, but it sounds really good. It
does. It sounds great. He knows what he's doing.
Sounds a little older.
Yeah, he knows how to use his voice, like where his strengths are, I think. Yeah. Which is, I mean, there's a lot of singers who can't do that. So it's very admirable, I think, to be able to be like, this is what I do, which I think is kind of his, like, at least from what I can see or hear, it's kind of his approach anyway. And like, from what I've read about him and like whatever interviews I can find about it, like he doesn't really give a shit. He'll just kind of just like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah. He comes across as like a very like kind of keeps to himself sort of guy. Mm-hmm. And like even when I've seen him play live, I mean, just does not talk at all between songs. He'll tune a little bit, and then he might be like, 6 songs in, he might be like, this song's called da da da, and then at the end of their set, he'll just be like, thanks. And one of my old bands got to open for them in the Ascot room, and I was like super excited, and we got there early, did the load in, and when they showed up, I was kind of like trying pretty hard not to, like stand and bug up. And I remember, so Richard Swift was in the band at the time, and it was like it was really outgoing and like friendly, and the other guys were like, "Hey, well, how's it going?" And like I went up to Jason, was like, "Hey man, I'm so excited to play with you guys." And he just smiled. He goes, "Cool." That's all he said to me the whole night. Like, and I don't think he was being a jerk. I just think that's him,
Yeah. No, I mean, In that interview, I keep on going back to it, but it's like the only thing I could find.
It's not a lot. He just really doesn't do interviews.
He doesn't, but like, and he was like kind of short, but like not in an unfriendly way, if that makes sense. Like in just a way that he's just like, I've said what I need to say.
Yeah, and I feel like he approaches songcraft the same way. Like sometimes I think like one of the funniest things about the new record, it's 8 songs, and I'm just like, come on, you couldn't have given us 10 songs. But at the same time, I also really respect. It's a kind of a power move.
Yeah. It kind of is, you know, like that's it. Why would you want it to be longer? I made it. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could also sort of see it as sort of an homage to, you know, maybe a time when he grew up. I remember my dad, when I was a tiny little kid, my dad had like an 8-track player in his work pickup. And so if you bought an album, you got 8 tracks.
Right.
So maybe it was sort of a subtle nod to like old albums too. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. It seems like he kind of has a fondness for nostalgia. With the name, you know, Starflyer 59, I guess he named it because he thought like it sounded like an old car.
I love that because I feel like a lot of bands, they want to try to sound really cool, and he just doesn't care. He's just like, the song's about a car. Or the song's about whatever, and it's just the most everyday stuff. But yeah, I'm just incredibly gifted songwriter and producer, and I feel like everything he does is incredibly calculated, and he probably I don't know, you listen to the layers and stuff on the albums, and it's just like, man, a lot of thought really went into this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And, you know, you kind of touched on Richard Swift being in the band too. He gets some incredible musicians to play with him at the same time. Richard Swift, for those who don't know, also an incredible producer and an incredible songwriter. He passed away a few years back, but the album The Hex by him is one of my absolute favorites. It's just such a great record. And so when I saw that he was playing in Starflyer 59, I was like, oh, no way.
Yeah, he's on that one album. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but yeah, Richard Swift is on this album called Old. And that's almost kind of like their Pink Floyd album. Yeah, I skimmed that one, but I did make a note like I should go back to that one. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's like not my favorite era of theirs, but it's like pretty impressive nonetheless. But yeah, so Leave Here Stranger, really interesting production choices. So the next one after Fashion Focus was Leave Here Stranger. I think there's one in between. Everybody Makes Mistakes was in between. Yeah, that's the one with the yellow album cover. That one's So that one's just like a really great pop record. It's really sparse arrangements on that one, but he throws some interesting stuff like some drum machines, and it feels like a great middle between Fashion Focus and Leave Here a Stranger. Like it feels like the logical step in between. Yeah, like I'd say like Leave Here a Stranger is the one you should check out if you just like really good guitar pop. Like it's incredible. I think that was my favorite of the ones so far that I heard. It really is like power pop, like almost like Big Star or something like that. Totally. That No Kind of News Story song is like super good. It's it's incredible. And there's even a couple tracks in that record where it's just vocals and a keyboard part and some fuzzy guitar that almost reminds me of like a Beatles track or something. I actually was going to say, like, it really does kind of sound like he was like, I kind of want to make a Beatles record. Yeah. And he does a great job at it. It was also recorded in mono, which I thought was interesting too. But you could tell, even with Everybody Makes Mistakes and Leave Here a Stranger, like those two records are great kind of companions, I think. Yeah, I feel like Leave Here a Stranger, definitely like the most kind of 60s like you're saying, there's some Beatles, there's some like Pet Sounds kind of stuff going on.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's recorded and mixed in mono, and I remember reading something. People were like, "Why'd you mix it that way? That's really weird." And he's like, "You wanted it to sound the way it would sound if you were in some old car, and the only thing the car had was an AM radio."
Yeah, I mean, and it sounds very good. Like, it's a great sounding album. It's produced super well.
Yeah, it's not lo-fi like you would think, like Guided by Voices, but they just took really interesting left turns with the mix.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, the mono, like, you wouldn't really, I don't think you would really notice if it was mono if you were like, you know, blasting on the speakers or something like that. But
I feel like that's a record that if you put on and you told somebody that it came out in like 1968, it'd be pretty believable.
Yeah, I think so too. It sounds slick, like the production's like a little more slick, but you could definitely just, like, you know, if you had the vinyl and you put it on, like, yeah, this is from 69 and it's you know, it's some long lost English band. It would certainly be believable.
To me, so like the highlight track on that record to me is Your Company. And it's like this like really like cool ballad with like mellotron and just really gorgeous melodies.
And that's the closing track too.
Well, the coolest thing on that track, in my opinion, is when it does the chorus reprise, there's a big tempo change. It was dun dun dun, and they like slow the tempo down by about 20 BPM. But while they slow it down, they also do a key change where they go up like a half a step, and it's just like, it's such a brilliant arrangement decision. It's not the kind of key change and tempo change and arrangement and climactic part of a song that an amateur could have put together.
No.
I just remember the first time I heard that, I was just like, what? Again, it's just something you don't hear people really do. And it was so smart. And it heightens the emotion of the song.
It really does. Yeah, it brings you on this kind of journey. And like, you know, even if for some reason, like, you had it on while you were like doing the dishes or something like that, I feel like at that point you would just kind of stop and be like, whoa, what was that? Like, it's just awesome. And like you said, like, that's not done by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
That is a master in their craft.
And then this will probably like bum some people out. And I sure hope it doesn't, because I think the guy's a genius, and then his catalog is worth really digging into. But kind of after that album, they put out new stuff, and I would usually pick it up. I'm like, this is pretty cool. But after that album, most of the material just didn't grab me the same way that all the albums up to that point did.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple years ago, he put out some cool singles. But then when they dropped the new album this last year, I was ecstatic. I don't ever want to be one of those people that gets bummed out when an artist spreads their wings, tries different things. But sometimes you just have the material that you kind of connect with more.
Yeah.
And so some of that earlier stuff I connected with more. And then you like even the style shifts. Like, I love Fashion Focus. I love Leave Here a Stranger. But there's kind of some of the mid-era stuff just didn't jump out to me as much. And I know I'm missing some albums in there too. Like, I sing the Portuguese Blues, and I think if you really want to cover this mid section Starflyer and like really do it justice, I think the guy you need to talk to is Quinn Larson.
And I did talk to Quinn Larson. Quinn Larson is the singer of a band called Madrian Skies, and he's been in a bunch of bands in the Twin Cities over the years. And I had asked him already to be on the podcast, and he also chose Starflyer 59. But since Tommy got it, he had to pick somebody else. So when Tommy said this, I thought, what a good idea to ask Quinn a couple things. And Quinn knew so much that we had to put it in a bonus episode for this one. So look out for that immediately after this one. But anyway, let's get back to the conversation with Tommy.
But for me, like the first 5 or 6 records just really do it for me, and the EPs and stuff. And he did a pretty cool record somewhere in the mid-era called The Brothers Martin, where it's him and his brother Ronnie Martin. And Ronnie is kind of like well respected in like synth pop communities because Ronnie did a lot of bands. Ronnie did Jet Electric and blanking out Foxglove Hunt. And he's got a couple other ones, and then like Ronnie produced a bunch of stuff too. Like Ronnie produced like a Fine China album and just a bunch of. He's a genius in his own right. Ronnie's stuff was definitely a lot more like faith oriented or whatever. So you can understand that's his catalog might not be for everyone, but as far as like a synth genius, I think he's respected for that. And but anyway, the two brothers did a record together, and it's quite good. It sounds a lot like New Order or Depeche Mode.
Oh, awesome!
It's basically a synth pop record with Jason's like chimey, surfy guitars layered over the top of it.
Yeah,
and they kind of split the singing and songwriting 50-50.
Well, that's interesting. I did not know that, but I will have to dig into that because that sounds awesome.
Yeah, and then that first Bon Voyage album is amazing to me. So musically, it sounds a lot like early Starflyer, but with his wife Julie. I think was this his wife's the singer? I could be wrong.
Okay.
Double check. But anyway, Bon Voyage, the first record where there's like standing in front of that office building, it's like really good stuff. It's kind of like the early Starflyer with the fuzzy guitars and the surfy leads that he's kind of famous for, but then like really cool, like chill female vocals. So I'm kind of getting out in the weeds now because we're supposed to be sticking to Starflyer.
No, we're good. No, that's fine.
The dude is so prolific though, like when you were like, we should just focus on one record. I'm like, man, that's
no. There's a reason why I instantly understood why you were like, you can't just do one record because you can't.
Maybe I should make a playlist, and I think there is a playlist that somebody made that's pretty good. I'll try to find it and send it to you.
Yeah, please.
But yeah, he's also produced a bunch too. Like he did some stuff for Cigarettes After Sex, which really makes sense. He worked with them. He worked with the Cold War Kids.
Yep. Yeah, he produced We Used to Vacation by the Cold War Kids.
Yeah.
And then he mastered Cigarettes for Sex's demo, which is rad. That's so cool.
So like, yeah, there's bands that came after him that got a lot bigger that he obviously influenced and they wanted to work with him.
Mm-hmm.
But he never really real big. I think maybe part of it too, though, like part of it was the label he was on, and then part of it was like he was never super into touring. Like I think for the first 4 or 5 records, the record would come out and then he'd go on a tour. But I think because he's a truck driver, I think when he wasn't driving truck, he probably didn't want to go back on the road.
Yeah, I think that's understandable.
So I think over time, when he was younger, he toured, but then I think over time it kind of turned more into like a studio thing. I think the interview, we listened to the same one. There was some discussion where he wanted to maybe, if not a full-blown tour, maybe just like hit a couple A-market cities and, play like LA, Chicago, New York kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Because the new record has been getting so much critical acclaim. Like, he could actually probably go out and tour and actually like come home with some money and
Yeah.
has decent sized crowds.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, where, you know, there's a lot of bands right now who have been prolific, but maybe didn't get their roses. And now all of a sudden, you know, they maybe like took a little bit of time away or something like that. And now they come back and they're just like realizing that they have all of these fans and they're like very, very stoked about what's happening and they want to go see it live. So they're able to pack these bigger rooms.
Well, it's kind of like the Sunny Day thing, you know, like I remember, I don't know if you were there, but me and Tracer, like one time we went and saw the Fire Theft at the Triple Rock and there were maybe like 40 people there. And it was like, are you kidding? It's like everybody's from Sunny Day Real Estate minus Dan. Like such an prolific, it's like such influential, incredible musicians, and even seeing Sunny Day like way back in the day, they had a buzz, but they weren't like massive or anything.
Right.
But the last couple times they came through, like sold out First Avenue, which is 2,000 cap room. But it's really cool, like being in the room and looking at the crowd, and then realizing like 50 to 60% of the crowd is probably like 25 or younger.
Yeah. There's a big group of people now who like are nostalgic for a time they never got to experience, you know? So yeah. I think that's why there's like, you know, all of the quote unquote emo fests and stuff like that going on.
I think it's really cool though for bands like Sunny Day or like earlier said Jawbreaker.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of these bands that made really special, really cool albums and just like dogged it on the road and eventually just had to kind of set it aside, get day jobs because it was just kind of a brutal lifestyle, you know, being gone for months and, you know, playing to a half empty room. And it's just really cool seeing some of these bands, like, while they went away, unbeknownst to them, their music influenced multiple generations of new people.
Yeah.
And then they'll come back and there's like this big crowd waiting for them. It's just like, if it feels like, it makes me feel good. I feel like these bands that worked really hard and kind of paved the way for the bands that followed them. I feel like a lot of them are like finally vindicated, and I'm just like so happy about it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of starting to happen for Starflyer right now. Like they might not play live much, but I know they've been getting like really, really strong press. And if you go on Apple Music or Spotify or other streaming services, you'll see that they have like a pretty large following. Mm-hmm. And I could tell you, like, I obviously don't know them personally, but I can tell you Starflyer is not the kind of band that's going to hire a bot farm to get plays.
No.
Like, those are all organic.
Yeah. No, that dude he's got other things to worry about. I don't think that's what he's going for.
Yeah. Yeah, he just kind of keeps putting out records. Well, what's funny is he puts them out on this tiny label called Velvet Blue Music, which is like his friend has just been running this little label as sort of a labor of love since the 90s, and puts out a lot of really cool stuff, and a lot of it flies under the radar. But I just love that now that their contracts have been fulfilled, Starflyer's just been putting out this stuff on Velvet Blue, which is really cool because I think all the releases do well and sell out, and then allows Velvet Blue to like continue to release some other stuff. And I think it's cool too, like the people that are picking up the Starflyer records, maybe they'll check out some of the other bands on that label as a result.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would highly recommend anybody dive into the Starflyer discography because it is a wild ride.
Yeah, super fun. Definitely one of my all-time favorite desert island bands. You know who else really likes them, which may or may not surprise you? Is like Ryan Tracer is a huge fan.
That doesn't really surprise me. That makes a lot of sense.
And all of our friends watching will know who Ryan is. Some people may not. Ryan, in his own right, is a really talented, prolific songwriter. He's been in various projects and just continues to make really cool and thought-provoking music. And but yeah, like Ryan has pretty eclectic tastes, and he's pretty picky. And
Yeah.
yeah, if I get a text with him like, dude, did you hear the new Jason Martin thing? Holy crap, it's awesome. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
I trust his opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Ryan and I also made a pop punk EP last year, I think, called Non-Locals. And I think it was just really fun to kind of go back to like a throwback. It sounds like 2003 in like the coolest way, I think. And so it was fun to do that with him. But yeah, he's the same guy. Like, you know, I'll, you know, hear from him being like, hey man, have you heard this Gillian Welch album? And then at the same time, he'll be like, I don't know, man, the Weezer's Black album isn't all that bad. So it's just like all over the place.
We had a really funny text exchange a couple weeks ago because he'll just text me out of the absolute blue, and he'll be like, dude, why is everyone slogging the new Pixies album so bad? Could you imagine getting that much hate simply because you got a different bass player? It's like, I get it. Kim Deal's amazing and legendary in her own respect, but come on. Mm-hmm. And so it was just like such a funny exchange. It's like,
yeah,
it's funnier if you know Ryan.
Mm-hmm. He's a sweetheart of a man.
He's like so chill and sweet, funny, but he also has these like really strong opinions. And it's like, I don't know. I love the dude. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I sort of went off on some rabbit trails here, but
that's okay.
The takeaways. I'm a pretty big Jason Martin stan.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I was a kid kind of coming off of pop punk and just starting to dip my toes into like My Bloody Valentine and Pixies, and then Jason Martin came along and blew my mind. And I feel like he's had a pretty big impact on my writing and approach to guitar and stuff. So
yeah,
not sure what else to say. I'm just a
yeah,
dude's a genius, and if you haven't listened to his stuff, at least check out the first 5 records, and the newest one is really good too. Definitely check out the new one. And then but yeah, if you want to follow me on the Instas, which is just Toilet Rats, if you've never heard the band before and you kind of dig into their catalog, I'm really curious which record maybe did it for you.
Yeah, please do follow up with Tommy about that, because I think that it's going to be an interesting conversation regardless. And I also want to know what people's takeaway from diving into that catalog is as well.
Thank you so much for having me on, Nick. And yeah.
Thank you so much for being on. And again, thank you for being a musician's musician.
Cheers.
Cheers.